October 1940. Warsaw. The ghetto walls are not yet finished, but the architecture of erasure has already begun. Brick by brick, the Reich is building a cage in the heart of a city that once held 3.5 million souls. The streets inside are narrowing, not physically, though soon they will, but in possibility. In future, in the space between what a child is and what a child might become. And into this narrowing world walks a woman carrying a nurse's bag. Her name is Irena Sendler. She is 30 years old, blonde hair, calm eyes. A manner so unremarkable that SS guards barely glance at her papers when she crosses the checkpoint on Leshno Street. They see a municipal social worker. A bureaucrat of mercy, perhaps. Someone useful to the occupation's narrative of order and hygiene. They do not see what she is actually doing. They do not see her memorizing faces. Inside the ghetto, the air smells of mace smoke and dampness, and too many bodies pressed into too little space. Typhus is spreading. Officially, this is why Irena is allowed entry. She works for the Social Welfare Department. Tasked with combating contagious disease, she brings medical supplies. She inspects sanitation conditions. She files reports in triplicate, as the Reich demands. But in the margins of those reports, in the quiet moments between official duties, she is compiling a different kind of documentation. Names, birth names, Jewish names. The names parents whisper to children at night. The names that will soon be illegal to speak aloud. The names the Nazis are systematically erasing from baptismal records, property deeds, and municipal registries across occupied Poland. She writes them down in a journal she keeps hidden beneath vials of antiseptic. She commits them to memory with the discipline of a scholar preparing for an exam she cannot afford to fail. Because Irena Sendler understands something the Reich has not yet calculated. That identity is the first thing you must steal if you intend to make someone disappear. And if you want to save them, you must remember what the oppressors are trying to erase. She moves through the ghetto like a cataloger of ghosts. A 4-year-old girl named Elżbieta Fakowska, who will not remember her own face in 10 years if no one preserves her name. A boy named Piotr, whose parents are already ill, who watches her with the kind of ancient suspicion that belongs to someone twice his age. Twins hidden behind a curtain, a mother's hand resting on their heads as if touch alone could shield them from history. Irena speaks softly. She does not promise rescue, not yet. She promises only that someone is paying attention, that someone sees them as more than numbers in a Reich census, that someone believes they will outlive this. And then she walks back out through the checkpoint, past guards who rifle through her bag and find nothing but bandages and paperwork. They do not search her memory. They do not yet understand that the most dangerous contraband in Warsaw is not hidden in a suitcase, is stored in the mind of a woman they have underestimated. But memory, Irena knows, is not enough. By November, the ghetto walls are complete, 3 meters high, topped with barbed wire and broken glass. Patrolled by SS units with orders to shoot anyone attempting to cross without authorization. The legal entries and exits narrow to a handful of guarded gates. The official justification is sanitation. Typhus must be contained. The actual effect is entombment. And Irena realizes that the names she has been collecting are not just documentation. They are a blueprint. A map of children who must vanish before the Reich can finish what it has started. She begins to ask herself a question that has no safe answer. What if documentation is not the end goal, but the beginning? What if she is not supposed to merely record these children's existence, but to actively erase it so thoroughly, so convincingly, that even the Gestapo's meticulous archives cannot trace them? It is a kind of inverse genocide. The destruction of identity in order to preserve life. And it will require something more dangerous than courage. It will require infrastructure, networks, co-conspirators, who understand that saving a child means making them disappear so completely that even their parents will not be able to find them after the war if there is an after. She sits in her small apartment on Ludwiska Street, the journal open on her lap. and begins to sketch out what will eventually become one of the most audacious rescue operations of the Second World War. Not with soldiers or weapons or international diplomacy, but with forged documents, false identities, and the exploitation of the Reich's own bureaucratic blind spots. The Nazis, she has noticed, are obsessed with paperwork. They catalog everything: eyesight, diseases, deportations, deaths. And in that obsession lies an opportunity, because a system that relies on documentation can be deceived by better documentation. She thinks of the priests she knows who might forge baptismal certificates, the ambulance drivers who could declare a healthy child infected to justify moving them outside the ghetto, the Polish families she has worked with in her years as a social worker, people who might accept a strange child into their home without asking questions, because some questions are too dangerous to answer. And she thinks of the sewers. Beneath Warsaw, beneath the ghetto, beneath even the awareness of the occupation, there is a network of tunnels that predate the Reich by half a century. Dark, flooded in places, rat-infested, but navigable, and unmapped in German intelligence files. It is not a plan yet. It is barely a hypothesis. But it is more than what existed yesterday. She closes the journal, hides it again, returns to the ghetto the next morning as if nothing has changed. But something has. Irena Sendler is no longer just a witness to atrocity. She is becoming an architect of escape, a woman who will spend the next 3 years walking past SS guards carrying sedated infants in carpentry crates, whispering instructions to teenagers about how to crawl through darkness without making a sound, and memorizing the new Christian names of children whose Jewish identities she has buried in coated jars beneath an apple tree. She does not yet know that she will save 2,500 lives. She does not yet know that the Gestapo will eventually break her body, but fail to break her silence. She does not yet know that history will forget her for 40 years, or that 4 American teenagers will one day resurrect her name from a footnote and force the world to remember. All she knows in October 1940 is this: the Reich believes it can erase a people by erasing their names. And she has decided to prove them wrong, one memorized face at a time. Because in the end, memory is not just documentation, it is defiance. February 1942. Warsaw Ghetto. The deportations have begun. Not as whispers or rumors anymore, but as scheduled events, timetables, quotas. The Nazis call it resettlement to the east, a bureaucratic phrase that smells of diesel exhaust and lime. 6,000 people per day are being loaded onto cattle cars, bound for a place called Treblinka, a name that means nothing to most Poles, but will soon mean everything. And Irena Sendler realizes she is out of time. For 16 months, she has been building a network in the margins, forging documents, cultivating contacts, memorizing names. But now, the margins are collapsing. The ghetto is not a holding pen anymore. It is a kill floor, and the children she has been cataloging are running out of tomorrows. So she stops planning and starts moving. The first child she smuggles out is an infant, 6 months old, too young to understand instructions, too young to stay quiet on command. Irena meets the mother in a basement on Widotorska Street, a place that reeks of mildew and desperation. The mother's hands shake as she wraps the baby in a thin blanket. There are no goodbyes. Goodbyes imply certainty, and there is no certainty left in the ghetto. Only the faint, irrational hope that a stranger with false papers might succeed where prayer has failed. Irena opens her nurse's bag. Inside, beneath a layer of bandages and medical supplies, is a shallow compartment. She crushes a sedative into a spoonful of water and holds it to the infant's lips. The baby drinks. Within minutes, the child goes limp, not dead. Not even sleeping deeply, but quiet, silent, unresponsive enough to pass as inanimate cargo. She places the infant in the hidden compartment, closes the bag, walks to the checkpoint. The SS guard barely looks at her. He has seen her 100 times. Municipal worker, Epidemic control. Authorized passage. He waves her through without opening the bag. And just like that, the first life slips through the cracks of the Reich's machinery. But one child is not enough. Not when 6,000 people are being deported every day. Not when the sound of boots on cobblestones means another family has been dragged from their apartment. Not when the ghetto is burning through its population faster than Irena can memorize names. So the operation scales. She recruits an ambulance driver named Henrik Pallister, a man whose face is so ordinary that Gestapo officers forget him 5 minutes after checking his documents. Henrik begins making runs into the ghetto under the pretense of transporting typhus patients. But the patients he carries out are not sick. They are healthy children declared infected by a network of complicit doctors who understand that a false diagnosis can be a life raft. She recruits a carpenter named Joseph Siskind, who builds toolboxes with false bottoms. The boxes are large enough to fit a toddler curled in fetal position, small enough to look like ordinary work equipment. Joseph delivers these boxes to construction sites inside the ghetto, then collects them hours later with additional cargo that does not appear on any manifest. She recruits priest's father Marceli Godlewski, Father Sarnetska men who forge baptismal certificates in the dead of night, backdating them years so that a Jewish child named Rachel becomes a Catholic girl named Maria, complete with sacramental records that can survive Gestapo scrutiny. And she recruits families, Polish families. Poor families, mostly. People who live in cramped apartments in Praga and Mikado, who have barely enough food for their own children, who take in a strange child with unfamiliar eyes and a story they are told never to question. Some do it for money. Irena's network provides a small stipend when possible. Most do it because they are asked. Because in a world designed to make cruelty easy and compassion dangerous, they choose danger. The methods evolve with brutal pragmatism. Infants are drugged and hidden in toolboxes, suitcases, even coffins. Toddlers are taught to bark like dogs and transported in pet carriers. It's because the Nazis do not inspect animals with the same rigor they inspect humans. Older children are coached for days on their new identities, memorizing Christian prayers, learning to cross themselves, shedding the Yiddish inflections that could betray them at a checkpoint. They are told to forget their parents' names, to forget their own names, to become someone else so completely that even under interrogation, the lie feels like truth. And then there are the sewers. Beneath Warsaw, beneath the ghetto walls, beneath the streets patrolled by SS units, there is a network of tunnels that the Reich does not fully map. They are narrow, flooded in places, inhabited by rats the size of small cats. But they connect the ghetto to the Aryan side of the city, and they are navigably few, are small. If you are brave, and if you are willing to crawl through darkness and filth for the chance to see daylight again. Irena's network begins using them for teenagers, children too old to be drugged, too aware to be hidden in boxes. A guide leads them into the tunnels at 2 a.m. when the patrols are thinnest. They crawl for hours, sometimes chest-deep in freezing water, breathing air thick with methane and rot. On the other side, another operative waits with dry clothes and forged documents. Not all of them make it. Some panic in the darkness. Some are caught by German patrols who have started monitoring the tunnel entrances. Some simply vanish lost in the labyrinth beneath the city. Their fates unknown. But enough survive. Enough make it through. And that becomes the operation's grim calculus. Not perfection, but percentage. Not every child, but as many as possible before the arithmetic of genocide catches up. The operation's genius lies not in its ambition, but in its exploitation of the Reich's own psychology. The Nazis are obsessed with paperwork, so Irena's network produces paperwork better than the Reich's own. Baptismal certificates with wax seals, medical records with official stamps, identity cards that survive document checks because they are more convincing than the truth. The Nazis fear disease, so Irena's network weaponizes that fear. A child declared infectious becomes untouchable transported out of the ghetto with minimal inspection because no SS officer wants to risk contamination for the sake of thoroughness. And the Nazis are contemptuous, so Irena's network hides in plain sight. Polish laborers are beneath notice. Municipal workers are bureaucratic furniture. A woman with a nurse's bag is so unremarkable that even when she crosses the checkpoint every single day, the guards stop seeing her as a person and start seeing her as a fixture. One afternoon in March 1943, Irena walks through the checkpoint, carrying a carpentry crate. Inside are twin sedated, silent, packed in sawdust to muffle any accidental sound. A Gestapo officer stops her, not because he suspects, but because he is bored. He asks what is in the crate. Construction materials, Irena says. Her voice does not waver. He does not open it. Instead, he smiles, a patronizing, avuncular smile, and compliments her dedication. "You work too hard, Fräulein. The Reich appreciates your service." She smiles back, thanks him, continues walking. And in that moment, the entire architecture of the operation is distilled into a single principle. The greatest disguise is not invisibility, but insignificance. To be so unremarkable, so expected, so thoroughly underestimated that even the people hunting you help you carry your contraband. By April 1943, when the ghetto uprising begins and the Reich responds with fire, Irena Sendler has smuggled more than 2,500 children past the Gestapo. Their names are written in code on tissue paper, buried in jars beneath an apple tree in a neighbor's garden. A map of invisible children scattered across Warsaw, living under false names in homes that are not their own. The Reich does not yet know she exists, but they will. And when they come for her, they will break her body in ways that never fully heal, but they will not break her silence. Because some things, some names are worth more than survival. October 20th, 1943. Pawiak Prison, Warsaw. They come for her at dawn. Not with sirens or drama, but with the efficient, practiced brutality of men who have done this 1,000 times before. 4 Gestapo officers. A pre-typed arrest warrant. Irena Sendler does not resist. She has known since the first child disappeared into a toolbox that this day would eventually arrive. The only question was when. They take her to Pawiak, a 19th-century prison that has been repurposed into the Reich's primary interrogation facility for political prisoners. The walls are thick. The windows are small. The screams do not carry beyond the courtyard. And for the next 10 months, they will try to break her. The interrogation begins with questions, simple ones at first. Name, address, employment history. The Gestapo officer across the table is polite, almost conversational. He offers her tea, calls her Pani Sendler with a formality that might seem respectful if not for the context. He asks about her work in the ghetto. She tells him about typhus prevention, sanitation, inspections, medical supplies. All true. All documented in official reports that the Reich itself authorized. He asks about the children. She says she does not know what he means. The politeness ends. What follows is not unique to Irena Sendler. It is the standardized methodology of the Gestapo's interrogation protocol refined over years. Applied to thousands, designed to extract information by destroying the body's capacity to withhold it. Beatings, dislocation of joints, electric shocks, to deliberate fracturing of bones in the hands and feet. Because pain in the extremities radiates inward and makes every breath an act of will. They break her legs, both of them, not in a single blow, but methodically small fractures compounded over days until the bones are shattered in so many places that they will never fully heal. She will walk with a cane for the rest of her life. She will live with chronic pain that no medication can fully silence. But she does not speak. They ask for names, the names of co-conspirators, the names of families sheltering children, the names of priests forging documents, the names buried in jars beneath an apple tree in a garden she will not identify. She tells them nothing. Not because she is immune to pain. No one is immune to what they are doing to her. but because she understands the mathematics of silence. Every name she gives them is a child who dies. Every address is a family dragged into Paviak. Every priest is a man who will be executed in the courtyard where she can hear the shots through her cell window. So she absorbs the pain. She compartmentalizes it. She turns her mind into a vault that even torture cannot open. And the Gestapo, for all their efficiency, cannot break what they do not understand, that some people measure their worth not by survival, but by what they refuse to surrender. Weeks pass, then months. Her cellmates change, some are released, most are executed. She listens to the rhythm of the prison. Morning roll call, afternoon interrogations. The sporadic gunfire that means someone has been taken to the courtyard. She learns to distinguish between the sounds of boots on stone and the specific cadence that precedes her own interrogation sessions. And she waits. Because her network Ghetto, the underground council to aid Jews, is still operational. And if there is one thing the Polish resistance has learned in 4 years of occupation, it is that the Reich, for all its brutality, is not incorruptible. Everyone has a price. On the night of October 19, 1944, 12 months after her arrest, a guard enters her cell. Not one of the usual ones, a man she has never seen before. He does not speak. He unlocks her shackles, helps her to her feet, though standing is a generous description of what her shattered legs can manage. He leads her through corridors she has only seen during interrogations, past offices where Gestapo officers are still working at their desks, past the courtyard where the execution posts are stained dark with old blood, and then, impossibly, out. Into the streets of Warsaw, into the cold October air, into a city that is still occupied, still dangerous, but no longer a cell. She does not know the details until later. Ghetto bribed the guard. The amount was substantially enough to buy a man's complicity, but not enough to buy his loyalty. He will report her escape by morning. She has hours, maybe less, before the Gestapo realizes she is gone. So she vanishes. Not out of Warsaw, that would be too obvious, but into it. Into the same network of safe houses and false identities she once used to hide children. She becomes what she made them, a ghost. A woman with no legal existence, no papers, no official address. For the next 8 months, until the Soviets liberate Warsaw in January 1945, she lives in the margins of the city she spent 3 years saving. And every day, she knows that if they recapture her, the 2,500 children whose names are buried in those jars will die. Because the Reich is methodical. If they find the jars, they will cross-reference the coded names with forged baptismal records. They will identify the families. They will empty every safe house in Warsaw and prove, once and for all, that kindness is a crime punishable by extinction. So Irena stays hidden and stays silent. The war ends. The children survive. But the story does not end with victory. It ends with erasure. Poland becomes a Soviet satellite state. The new regime has no interest in celebrating Ghetto resistance network with ties to the Polish government in exile, to Catholic institutions, to the kinds of grassroots organizing that communist authority finds threatening. Irena's story is buried, not violently, not dramatically, simply ignored. She returns to social work, raises a family, walks with a cane, and never fully explains why. The jars are eventually dug up, the names decoded. Some families reunited, but quietly, privately, without state recognition or public ceremony. The world moves on. The Holocaust becomes history. The heroes become monuments, mostly soldiers, mostly men, mostly people whose valor fit neatly into narratives of military triumph. A woman who smuggled children in toolboxes does not fit that narrative, so she is forgotten. For 40 years. Until 1999. Until 4 teenagers in Uniontown, Kansas students in a rural high school 6,000 miles from Warsaw, bowl across a footnote in a history book. A single sentence about a Polish social worker who saved 2,500 Jewish children. The students assume it is a typo. Surely it means 250 children. Surely someone who saved 2,500 would be famous. They research, they write letters. They discover that Irena Sendler is still alive, 98 years old, living in a small apartment in Warsaw, still walking with a cane, still largely unknown outside a small circle of historians. The students write a play, perform it at their high school. The story spreads. Journalists take notice. Documentaries are made. Nominations for the Nobel Peace Prize follow. And Irena, who spent 60 years in obscurity, suddenly finds herself celebrated. When they ask her why she did it, why she risked everything for strangers' children, her answer is so simple, it sounds like a rebuke to the question itself. Every child saved with my help is the justification of my existence on this earth, not a title to glory. She does not speak of courage. She does not claim heroism. She speaks only of justification, as if saving a life is not an extraordinary act, but the baseline requirement of being human. And perhaps that is the most unsettling part of her story. Not that she was extraordinary, but that she believed she was ordinary. That in a world designed to make cruelty easy and compassion dangerous, she chose compassion not because she was uniquely brave, but because she could not imagine choosing otherwise. Irena Sendler dies in 2008 at the age of 98. Her funeral is attended by many of the children she saved, now in their 70s. Some meeting each other for the first time, all carrying names she gave them in the shadow of the swastika. The jars are preserved in a museum in Warsaw. The tissue paper inside is fragile now, yellowed with age, the ink fading. But the names are still legible. 2,500 names. 2,500 justifications. And a question that echoes louder than any answer. How many other Irena Sendlers did the world forget? How many people saved lives in toolboxes and sewers and silence, only to be erased by histories that prefer their heroes loud and their victories simple? And if we only remember the ones who were rediscovered by accident by 4 teenagers in Kansas doing a school project, how many are still buried? Not in jars beneath apple trees, but in the footnotes we never bother to read.